Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
This episode is proudly sponsored by MetaGeek. For more than a decade, network professionals have used MetaGeek Wi-Fi tools to deploy, maintain, and troubleshoot wireless networks. Visit metageek.com/CTS and use the code CTS10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase of MetaGeek brand hardware and software. Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast, and today we have an interesting podcast episode around WISP, Wireless Internet Service Provider. And today we have our co-host Francois, who's on the line. How are you doing, Francois?
I'm very good. How are you, Roel?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a fine morning. And also, from Canada, we also have Steve McKim, and he's from Manitoba. How are you doing, Steve?
Good, Roel. How's it going, guys?
Doing
Thanks
great.
for having me on.
Yeah, glad you were able to join us and talk about WISP, because you have had an interesting and exciting adventure that I've followed on social media and through Slack about your journey to getting there. And so we wanted to bring you on to talk about starting this business, kind of the challenges you ran into, some of the successes, and then we'll talk about the technical aspect of things, which is setting up your point-to-points, or if you're doing point-to-multi-points, and also some of your network infrastructure, if you can go into that. But Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and let them know who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Steve McKim. I live in a small town in Manitoba called Rossburn, kind of right in the middle of Canada. My day job is I'm a network administrator for a K-12 school division. I'm on Twitter at elfmckim. I've got a blog at greatwhitewifi.com/blog. And yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you also have a day job like myself, and you also do this WISP in addition to that. And I also do a couple of things outside of my day job. And maybe you can go into some of the challenges. Why did you start a WISP in your area while maintaining your day job?
Yeah, for sure. Before I worked for the school division here, I worked for a WISP in Winnipeg. That was kind of my first job out of school for about 6 years. And it was kind of something I always wanted to try doing for myself. So far through my career, I've kind of felt that I've just been inheriting other people's projects. You know, you come into a new job, there's already something built, so you're dealing with somebody else's network or somebody else's projects. And I saw this as an opportunity to take something that I'm passionate about and kind of turn it into, or make it my very own, my baby, if you will. So that's what I went for. And then the story behind it is the school division I work for is a partner in a fiber optic co-op that put in, I think it was like 300 kilometers of fiber throughout all the communities in the school division.
Wow.
And because we were leasing connectivity from a different wireless ISP, and like our buildings were getting about 30 megabits per second max WAN connectivity, and then our internet pipe was like 80 or something like that. And now we have, we've got 10 gig physical connectivity between every building. We don't come anywhere close to using that.
Right.
But what the co-op was able to offer to communities and businesses and their partners, the other partners in the co-op are some of the municipal governments in the area. So there's 3 of the other partners are building their own municipal networks for their residents and their ratepayers. So people they're going to be getting like gigabit fiber to the home for less than $100 a month, or fast wireless, 60 to 100 megabits per second to the home for 50 to 60 or 50 to 75. I think it depends on what part or which municipality they live in. But
yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, whereas previously they were paying, I mean, like at my house, because I can't get my network to my house yet, I'm paying like $120 a month for, I think, 12 down and one up, something like that, and 120 gigabytes usage per month. So what the fiber's done is opened that up for everybody. And so like my point of presence is at the high school in Rossburn here. And from there, it's on to fiber and out to the, I think there's a couple cross connects, but to the Manitoba Internet Exchange, it's all fiber. So from the high school, I have a wireless, a point-to-point link that's about it's only about 150 meters. So, same in yards about. And then it's my distribution site. So, my internet access it's right there, which kind of made it a no-brainer.
And that's interesting because your school allowed you to even put that antenna on their property for you because you're able to tie into that fiber as well.
Yeah, that's correct. And that was part of the agreement, or part of the co-op's business plan, was that the school was going to allow those types of mounts. They're
Awesome.
not allowing anyone to put up towers on school property,
right?
But they are allowing customers to use the rooftops to then get to a tower, or in my case, a 120-foot grain elevator. Yeah,
that's your main your backhaul connection. There is that fiber. That's your where all your internet comes from. Then you take an antenna and go towards another higher vantage point, is what I'm guessing. That elevator tower that you mentioned.
Correct. Yeah. So on top of the elevator, I've got 4 90-degree sectors.
Oh, okay. And we'll get into that technical aspect of it, but you saw the business opportunity here to start a WISP. Talk about getting into that, like getting into the business side of things, because a lot of us are very technical, and so when you start something like this, of course you have to have a plan in place, and now you got to be talking to consumers and other things. So can you go into that process and how you begun?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, the first step was to discuss it with my wife and then put some numbers together. So, build a business plan. So because the elevator was here, I didn't have to build a tower, but obviously I need to find out who owned it and then talk to them. Being that it's a town of about 800 people, that was pretty easy. So, you look at that. The elevator owner gave me access to it in return for 2 free internet connections, one for him and one for his son.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And it's the same kind of thing, right? Like they're both paying over $100 a month for limited connectivity and limited usage. So, they're pretty happy to have it. And after that, I'd go to the co-op, and get pricing from them on the, basically leasing a VLAN, from them to, my actual internet provider who's in Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the internet provider, I pay a cost per month per customer for, public IP address space and, internet connectivity. So I don't actually do, this is a technical piece, I guess, but I don't actually do DHCP for my customers. My provider handles that.
Oh, okay, so that's handed off. That makes things a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, exactly. It's less hardware for me to maintain and less things for me to have to worry about.
Yeah, and some of these extra things that you don't even consider, like the whole tower, because usually you'll have to lease space on the tower. And I know here in San Jose, some places charge per antenna that you put on the roof or on a tower, and then there's the whole fee that you'll have to pay for your internet, and then you got to take that into consideration with how many clients you're expecting to get. So there's quite a bit of math involved on the business side of things. Make sure you're pricing things out and making sure you're gonna at least break even at some point. So I'm sure you thought about those things.
Yeah, exactly. So I figured my break even point to cover my monthly expenses was about a dozen customers. After I figured that out, I realized that I'd forgotten about a billing platform. Because one of my other considerations was I didn't want to have to be printing and mailing invoices every month and collecting
just
checks
digital.
and depositing checks. So so far I've been doing only like automated credit card payments. The platform I use for that is it's called Sonar.
Mm-hmm.
It can be found at sonar.software, but it's been really awesome because you set the customer up, you set the software, you set the system up with all your services and your pricing and that kind of thing. You create the customer's account, you add their service, you can add like your install fee as a one-time charge or whatever. You make the customer active, and then all the payments are automatic.
But you have to pay for the service, right?
You have to pay for the service. Yeah, that's like, I think it's about $130 Canadian a month, and that's up to 100 customers, and then it goes up on a per customer basis from there, I believe. Okay. But it's well worth it. I mean, when I was reviewing these systems, one of the comments I read was, it's the cheapest, best employee you'll ever have. And it's true because for me, even at, 20 clients, if I have to spend even 5 minutes per client per month doing billing.
Yeah, that eats up a lot of time and money.
Yeah, like that's math. 2 hours or more.
and then you're trying to, since you have a day job, you're trying to make this efficient as possible, so you're not having to take time out of your day to try and do some of this like back office type work.
Yeah, day job and a family, right? So they're both equally as important in considering. Like usually what I do is, especially now that it's winter, right now it's dark by about 5:30 here, so installs now are kind of a Saturday thing only, but I don't touch any of this stuff until the kids are in bed.
Awesome.
Right now.
That is awesome. I really like what you've done here because you've somehow created this additional source of income while you have a day job, and you're still able to see your family.
Yeah, and that kind of all falls into the business plan of it, right? Because not only do you have to figure out where you need to be, is it worthwhile, but how am I going to make sure that I don't put myself in a hole where I'm getting called out all the time because I've hooked up this customer that I probably shouldn't have, and now they have crappy service and they're not happy and I'm not happy because I have to run out and try to fix it for them every week because it's, they didn't have good line of sight, or the antenna was mounted in a bad spot. And so I've already turned down maybe a half dozen customers just because it's going to be a problem. It won't work well.
So actually going into that, how do you deal with support? Do you have a ticketing system that they can send an email to, or do they just call you? And then
they just call or text me generally. Knock on wood, I haven't had any major outages yet. I'm sure I'll have one now that I've said that, but we had a couple. I think it was about 3 or 4 days after I went live, we had a massive windstorm, like 60, 70 mile per hour gusts.
Oh wow.
And I didn't sleep very much that night. But everything was good. The only time I've had an outage was when we had a power outage.
Okay. And so when you have customers that want service, how do they find you? How do they say, oh, look, there's somebody providing internet service here, and it's at the cost that they're offering it compared to my 12 megs that I get? I can get up to, say, 100 megs or so. How do they find you?
Yeah, so part of building my business plan, I was a Google form, basically, which I put out in on the town here has a Facebook group, so I put it out on there. I put an ad in our local like 2-page monthly paper, and just word of mouth. And I think I had about 50 responses to that in the summer, no, that might have been the spring still, but
I think that's a lot of responses. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. And a lot of it, it was about half were actual potential customers who were within the coverage radius that I was planning, and who actually had line of sight to the tower that they were able to confirm on their own. So that was how I started. Once I went live, I had sent out, previous to going live, I had email addresses from those people who responded to that first survey. So I emailed them and said, we'll be live in, a week or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but, just to let you know, because you responded to the survey, you can have first crack at being connected. So I think, I had my first customer hooked up the same day I finished all my access points and getting that stuff online. So, but then after that, I also put out, just a flyer in the mail to all the post office boxes in Rossburn here, which was like 350 or something. Mm-hmm. And on there, I just put, information about my packages and a little bit about my company, and which is called 45 Networks, by the way. And a small, actually just like a spreadsheet where I took there's three other ISPs in the area now. Two are in town only, and one is rural. It's the other WISP, who I happen to be a customer of right now, but kind of took their three kind of mid-tier or most common packages that I thought people would be getting, and then kind of compared those to what I was offering. Well, upload speeds, download speeds, is there a usage limit, and the cost, and put that right on the bottom, so people just had a point of reference to see what I was offering and how it compared, rather than having them go looking to check what they were paying or go on all the competitors' websites themselves.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a high demand since you started since you have the network up and running?
Yeah, it's been a good level of demand. I'm not stressing out trying to keep up or leaving people hanging for 2 weeks. But it's also been constant. So, like it said, juggling, or not juggling, but I'm balancing my day job and family and other commitments, and this quite nicely at this point.
Yeah, you're sitting pretty comfortable, not too demanding. And you're dealing with consumers right now, or do you have to? Are you also servicing businesses as well?
I have one business right now, and they were kind of a funny story, because they had gotten broken into recently and had their DVR for their camera system stolen. So they were changing over their camera system, and they put in a lot of cameras. And the DSL connection in town is only about 500K up. Oh, okay. And I was checking my monitoring after I hooked them up, and they have a steady, constant, always 24/7, 1 meg upload
just from the cameras
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. At least now it gets uploaded somewhere, right? Versus storing that coverage on site and then having it stolen and serves a purpose.
Exactly.
And do you see that their demands or requirements are much different from your consumer customers?
Mainly only that their peak traffic time is opposite time of day, right? So your businesses are 9 to 5, and your residences are
in the evening after they get home,
5 to midnight or ish. Depends on if they have school age kids or not, or if school's in session. On professional development days when kids are home, you notice it. You notice that in your monitoring.
Okay. And I'll get a little bit into monitoring in a bit, but I did want to talk about doing some sort of survey. So you have a customer that you're going to bring on. What are your first steps that you got to do to make sure you can provide service? How do you survey it? Do you climb on their roof and take a look, make sure, or do you bring any antennas, radios with you to see if you can get a signal? What other tests do you do to make sure you can deliver that service before you actually bring them on as a customer?
So the first thing I do is, if they're in town, get their street address, or if they're out of town, get either detailed driving directions that I can kind of follow on, say, Google Earth or Google Maps, or section, township, and range, or GPS coordinates. Any of those will do. Plot it on Google Earth. Have a look. I'm using all Ubiquiti hardware for my distribution and client radios. So Ubiquiti has, they have a mapping tool called AirLink, which is at airlink.ubnt.com. And so you set up your access points in there. It'll draw the coverage based on the terrain, and you put in a reference height for your CPEs. So, and after I've found out where they're located, I'll jump into AirLink, plot their location on there, and just see, just strictly based on terrain, if it's even possible. So if they're in a valley, obviously it's not going to work. Or if there's a hill between them and my distribution site, it's not going to work. But if that looks good, then I'll schedule a site survey and get on site and go look at the house, around the yard, climb on the roof, that kind of thing. And then from there, I don't really do signal testing because, I do a link budget and check for a line of sight, because I'm using 5 gigahertz for distribution. Basically, if there is no line of sight, there is no connection.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Channelizer with Cisco Clean Air from MetaGeek. Channelizer with Cisco Clean Air is software that provides remote access to the Clean Air radio on your Cisco access points, so you can troubleshoot spectrum issues from your desk, down the hall, or halfway around the world. Using Channelizer, you can find and classify interfering devices automatically and view the duty cycle of each unique transmitter from the perspective of your Clean Air AP. Channelizer provides a complete picture of your RF environment and easy-to-read visualizations, so you can identify and fix issues quickly. No longer will you need to go on-site or even get up from your desk to troubleshoot spectrum issues. To thank you for supporting our friends at Clear to Send, MetaGeek is offering a limited time 10% discount to all listeners. Visit metageek.com/CTS and use the code CTS10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase of Channelizer with Cisco Clean Air. And why is it that you look at the yard? Because people will think, well, you're putting the radio probably on the roof. Why would you need to look at the yard? Are you looking for trees that might be blocking the area?
So with rural customers, they're all farmyards, right? So they typically will have big shelter belts, could treat, 30 to 50 foot trees, either all 4 sides of their yard or 3 sides, or the side between them and the distribution sites. So what we can do is we'll run a cable, assuming it's under 300 feet, run a cable from the house. It's direct burial cable, so we run the cable from the house to outside the tree line, and then we mount the antenna like 8 or 10 feet up on a pole or a post in the ground or something like that. And then that cable gets trenched in. I actually did one last week where there was no good spot outside his tree line within 300 feet of his house, but he did have an outbuilding with power. So we ran from the antenna outside his tree line to the shed, and then another wireless link from the shed to the house.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you do what you got to do, but again, as long as you do it right, there's no reason it won't work for years.
So do you provide all of the equipment in this case, or did the customer have to pay an extra?
In the special cases, like that one where there's an extra wireless link, I do ask them to purchase that hardware.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just for them alone, right? It's like
a one-time fee.
Yeah, because when you're making up your business plan, you kind of come up with what your standard install is going to look like. and the associated fee with that. So, how much cable, what kind of mount are you using? Just a standard like satellite mount J-pole, or are you going to include a tripod and a 10-foot mast with that? Or, you go from there.
So in the service you offer to your customer, do you limit the bandwidth, or is it just open and you give them the best that you can?
Yeah, I kind of just give them what I can. At this point,
Okay.
I don't foresee myself becoming a huge provider. If I got to know, 30 or 40 clients, I'd be very happy.
Okay.
I may need to start doing some traffic shaping on certain types of traffic, to make sure that the quote unquote legitimate traffic does get prioritized.
Okay.
But one thing I won't limit is usage, because that's number one. That's my big selling point.
Okay.
Over the other
advantage.
Yeah, and because, like I said, because I have that fiber right there, I don't need to worry about it. I'm not saturating any links anywhere. I don't have 3 or 4 links back to my point of presence. It's simple.
Cool.
So what type of throughput do you get from the customer's house?
I actually recently dropped. I started off using 40 meg channels.
Okay.
So I was getting 150, 160 megabits down and 60 up. Now that's using GPS sync, which when you use GPS sync with Ubiquiti, and I think with most of the other platforms too, you get a fixed frame. So Ubiquiti offers either 8 millisecond or 5 millisecond frame times.
Okay.
And then there's also an upload to download ratio that you need to set. So I'm currently running on 75-25 download to upload.
Okay.
You can go 67-33 or 50-50, I believe. Or if you go to no sync, then it's basically whatever you pull in either direction, half duplex. So
yeah,
the capacity of those links, I guess, would be about 200 or 210 based on the speeds I was seeing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, what's the advantage of GPS sync?
GPS sync gives you frequency reuse. So on my 4 sectors, I use an AB channel plan. So my north and south sectors are using channel A. Okay. And my east and west channel sectors are using channel B. And what GPS sync does is they're synced up with time from GPS satellites so that all your APs transmit all at the same time, and then they receive from clients all at the same time. So as long as you have the channels like on your back-to-back sectors are the same, then your APs aren't hearing each other because they're both transmitting at the same time. And they can't, the south sector isn't going to hear clients talking to the north sector just because of the front to back ratio on the antennas and the horizontal spacing between them and that kind of thing, and the power level when they get there, right? So
yeah, you don't want to have the same channels facing a direction where they can hear each other, because then when they send and receive, it's just they're gonna step on each other basically. And the GPS sync, as long as you plan it out, your channels carefully on how you have your sectors, then that GPS sync helps quite a bit with the send and receive.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't, my site's not super duper busy, by industry standards. I mean, I've got 4 APs and one backhaul. The backhaul isn't GPS synced, but it's short enough that I can put it down in a DFS channel and it still works great. But I know guys that'll have 9, 10 different sectors all running in 5 gig.
Wow.
Yeah, and then their backhauls are in there as well, and they're GPS synced.
And do you know if they're doing more than 40 megahertz channel widths?
Not input to multi-point. Not with Ubiquiti anyways. Ubiquiti doesn't allow 80 meg channels on point to multi-point.
Okay.
Yet. I think Mimosa does. though I'm not sure, so I shouldn't really say that.
Well,
it's okay.
You did say you use Ubiquiti equipment. What type of equipment are you using? They have quite a few products to select from. What did you end up settling on?
For the access points, I'm using their 5 gigahertz Rocket AC prisms. And the prism is kind of their filtering technology that they have built. And these have GPS sync and metal case, which is also kind of nice. The antennas, we're talking Ubiquiti stuff. The clients I'm using are a combination. For the longer shots, I'm using their Light Beam. What is it called? Light Beam. I guess it's Light Beam Gen 2 now. But it's a 23 dBi 5 gigahertz client. It's got a very small reflector dish, and then the feed horn has the radio and everything built right into it. And then I've also used their Nano Beam, which is a very small. It would be about 6 inches in diameter. A little plastic guy. These can both be wall mounted or pole mounted. So that's kind of handy, all with the same mount. And they're nice and light to work with. They're easy to align. They have little, very small bubble level on the back. So you can make sure the polarization, is it polarity or polarizations, are going to line up. Cause when you get into 2x2 on these outdoor shots, if the polarities are off, then you'll get mismatched signal strengths on your your chains.
You're talking about your horizontal
you're not using,
and vertical.
The only all we have for MIMO is the different polarities, right? We're not getting reflections,
right? You're not getting.
At least you're hoping you're not.
Yeah, you shouldn't be getting multipath, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and when it comes to these installs, are you the only one aligning these antennas? So you have your sector just pointed in a direction. So as long as what's the degrees that it will shoot out from the sector? Is it like 60 degrees or 45?
Horizontal beam width on the ones I'm using is 90. I'm using an RF element sector. I had looked at using horns, but the gain wasn't quite there for the range I wanted to cover. It's a 17 degree horizontal beam width. I'm just trying to find the vertical on the ones I'm using. Sorry, did I say 17 degree? I meant 90. Yeah, 90 degree, 17 dBi. My bad. And you can get, like, they make, oops.
So you hooked up these sectors into your Rocket AC prism?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. The sectors come with a nice little mounting spot specifically built for the Ubiquiti radios.
Okay. That's cool.
They kind of just clip right in.
Yeah. So that's neat. So you don't have to purchase Ubiquiti sectors. You can plug in this other vendor, which is, was it RF Elements is what you said?
Yeah. RF Elements is what I'm using. And exactly. There's a few, antenna manufacturers out there that kind of make specific models for Ubiquiti or Cambium or Mimosa. Like RF Elements is one of them. There's KP Performance, and then Cambium and Ubiquiti and Mimosa all make their own antennas, obviously. But it's nice that you have a few options. So the horizontal beam width is 90 degrees on these. The elevation beam width is 7. And so, I mean, we all know as you increase your antenna gain, your beam width gets lower, right? So, there's 20 degree sectors that I looked at, but their vertical beam width was so low. And what happens when you're mounting sectors like this, you need to figure out what your down tilt is going to be. And when you have such a narrow vertical beam width, too much down tilt and you're only covering a very small area with your main beam, and too much and not enough down tilt, and you're just shooting over the horizon, right over all your clients. Exactly. So, and then like there's down tilt calculators out there where you input your antenna height and the vertical beam width and the down tilt, and it'll tell you how many miles or how many kilometers that main beam is actually covering. Like say from 1 kilometer out from your tower to 6, or you're over the horizon or whatever. So that's another important consideration when you're planning your hardware and your coverage and range and things like that.
Okay. How about your point-to-point connections? Are they also Ubiquiti, or do you use a different vendor for that?
Yeah, for now, I'm just using a couple of the light beams, Ubiquiti light beams. It's like I said, it's such a short hop. I think I'm running a 20 meg channel in Uni 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's so short that it meets that, it can run the low power required by the DFS channels. And I may switch it to 60 gig in the future, depending on growth.
Yeah, and that'd be interesting. And I don't think Ubiquiti is in the 60 gig space yet.
They are not at this point. I think I read that MikroTik just got into it.
They just, I just saw that not too long ago. They just got into it, but when you're using 60 gigahertz, it does have to be a shorter distance. Like unlike some of the Ubiquiti equipment, you can go miles and miles with this. I think with 60 gigahertz, no, maybe in your case it might work for you because of the rural, but in my case, I can only go maybe about 3 miles with 60 gigahertz, if that.
Oh yeah,
it's such a yeah. It's the attenuation with even oxygen.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oxygen and large amount of rain.
Yeah, rain fade will kill it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for my main link, like I said, it's about 160 yards. I think.
Yeah,
so
that'll be no problem for you.
Yeah,
and you'll get more bandwidth out of that.
Yeah, and the nice thing about my fiber connections is it's easily scalable.
Yeah, and you mentioned 60 gigahertz. One good reason is with some of the equipment that's out there, you'll get better bandwidth, but also it's another unlicensed spectrum, because with the Ubiquiti equipment, you are using unlicensed in the 5 gigahertz spectrum there. Do you run into interference, or you're not seeing much of that? And if you do see interference, how do you mitigate that? How do you detect it with the equipment you have, and how do you react to that and have it change?
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. One of the considerations for switching that backhaul to 60 gigahertz is to get off of 5. As far as interference goes, there's a little bit around. The other kind of incumbent WISP in the area does have a tower. How far would that be? Maybe a mile away or so. I can definitely see it on my north sector.
Okay.
The Ubiquiti, the Rocket 5 AC prisms that I'm using, they have a second chip in them for what Ubiquiti calls their AirView software, which is a spectrum analyzer, basically. And so it used to be that if you wanted to run that AirView software, it would disconnect all your clients. But now with the second chip, you could run it 24/7 if you wanted to.
Oh, okay. That's really useful.
So you get the waterfall view and the TD, the time domain view. And that's pretty handy. So you can definitely see what's going on. I've noticed from the client side perspective, if you run that, you definitely pick up, you can see what everybody's home routers are running on.
Do you ever see that interfering with what you have with your equipment? And I know Ubiquiti's pretty good on providing you with the tools that you need to run efficient links, but does it automatically change the channel if there's so much interference, or do you have to manually do that?
No, it doesn't. And I don't, for this type of stuff, I'm not a big fan of automatically changing channels. that said, check it. I check it every morning and every night. The access points actually have in their main dashboard, they have a view or a piece of the dashboard that shows you the entire 5 gigahertz band, and it's kind of color coded to low noise, medium noise, high noise, kind of blue to red. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to see if they're having any issues. I mean, and you can see in the signal quality and that kind of thing. And make changes as needed. The only change I've had to make so far is I went from 40 megahertz channels down to 20, which there was really no need for me to use 40. I would just kind of want to see how fast things would go to start with. Okay. And, as far as mitigation, you can talk to, you can track it down and try to talk to somebody. As far as that other tower goes, there's probably not much I'm going to be able to do other than just avoid it.
So do you talk with the other WISP in the area?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
They're quite large, and I'm not sure they would
listen,
do anything.
Quote unquote.
Yeah,
listen to you.
Okay. At least with customer routers, right? When I'm configuring them, I can set them to run on a different channel or in a DFS channel, or sometimes if a customer comes to me and they want to sign up, and they're switching from, say, a DSL provider that had given them a combo, like a modem router combo device, so they're going to need a router. Sometimes I'll just install a 2.4, like a single band router, because it's going to do for them what they need, and it's not going to interfere with my stuff,
with your equipment. Yeah. And they probably don't have many neighbors close to them running 2.4 as well, so there's probably no interference
for the rural customers. You can certainly let them go to town with a 40 meg channel and 2.4, and it's not going to bother anybody.
What? Not that we recommend always using 40 megahertz channels on 2.4, but yeah, in your case,
no,
it's it actually works.
It depends, to quote the great Samuel Clemens.
Yes, you've done your planning, you've done your due diligence, and it's not going to interfere with your equipment that you're running on their roof and having their connection back to the internet, and then B, there's no neighbors to contend with when it comes to these channels, because obviously you're also running 5 gigahertz, so you're not having to run multiple 5 gigahertz customers like right next to each other, right? I think that would be quite a challenge as well. I know here in the Bay Area that would be, being that there's a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of houses close to each other, everyone running their own 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, their home Wi-Fi, and that to me would seem like a challenge to run with the interference itself. And so that's why the 60 gigahertz and 70 to 80 gigahertz type of equipment is very popular in San Francisco, as an example.
Yeah, and it's in the back of my mind to switch either my business customers or some of my close-in customers who are within that kind of, quarter mile or half mile from the grain elevator to 60 gig in the future. It just depends.
Yeah, you're just not quite there yet, right?
No, I definitely don't need it now. I mean, the one business customer I do have, I did notice one day that their router was running right, like 80 meg channel by default, right, in Uni 3, which was interfering with their connection a bit. So, all I did was send them a text and said, hey, can you have a look? And this particular customer is a little bit tech savvy. I mean, you get people who you could try to suggest they do something and they're like, pardon? But this guy, so I just said, hey, can you maybe move your channel down to pick channel 36 in your router?
Right.
Okay, sure. Then he did it, and, all good from there.
Yeah, and I bet they appreciated it because you're being proactive at that point and helping them make their connection better.
It goes a long way, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Do you have any tips for somebody that wants to get into point-to-point, point-to-multi-point type of work? I'm sure you've got something that you've learned after doing your first couple installs that you would do differently.
Yeah.
Of course, planning is one, right?
Well,
you can't just
planning for sure. Learn how to do a link budget. Make sure you study up on your local regulations. Obviously, those vary from country to country and frequency band to frequency band. Understand the differences between unlicensed and licensed frequency bands and the regulations that go with that. Get into or start trying to learn about the effects of weather, thermal ducting, rain fade, all that kind of stuff on different frequency bands. There's, when it comes to planning, there's more than just saying, oh, I have line of sight and my Fresnel zone's clear. Mm-hmm. Things like ground reflections. When you talk about multipath, you can still get negative reflections on a point-to-point link, even if your Fresnel zone's clear, depending on how you've got things installed. If you're roof mounting, you need to be, a certain height off the roof, depending on how far back from the roof edge you are. Things like that, and experience. If you can talk to someone who's got experience, the community thing, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, a few years ago, I had a guy who wanted to put up a 24 gigahertz link. It was Ubiquity Air Fiber, and it was something like, it might have been 10 miles.
Oh, wow.
But the towers weren't designed because when you get antennas with such narrow beam width, right, mm-hmm. any wiggle in the tower
that's
is going to affect your link, right? And these towers weren't designed to be used for that type of link. So you kind of, like you said, it's really all planning. Failure to plan in this case is planning to fail.
And
you got to start from the ground up, basically.
That would be a costly failure to purchase into those air fibers, then have a lease that you would sign into on the tower, only to find out the tower moves whenever the wind blows, so your link goes in and out.
Well, yeah, this wasn't a tower lease situation. It was, they had put up these towers, and it was weird because the consultant who was doing it, I said, that's probably not going to work. He said, yeah, I know. I just want to try it. And he had a 5 gig link that was going up at the same time. But
I see you guys are fortunate enough to test things.
Yeah.
Here in California, not quite so easy.
No.
They're going to try to lock you into like a 3-year contract.
Yeah, right.
So, Steve, this is going to be your first winter, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Are you worried about it, or do you have any concern, or are you eager to see how your infrastructure will, beat the weather, the cold weather?
Yeah, I don't have too many concerns. Like as far as temperature goes, the radios, they kind of keep themselves warm, right? There's other manufacturers that have small heaters in their gear, but they don't turn on unless the radio's booting up or about to boot up.
Do you carry spare radios just in case one fails for whatever reason?
Yeah, okay. Definitely have spares on hand. The only real concern that I have with the weather is, number one, wind, which I've already, and that's not a concern of the wind just affecting the connection. That's a concern of the wind blowing something off the roof.
Yeah, because
but you take that into consideration when you're doing all your installs, right? So
because you have different mounting solutions, I would imagine you can do the non-penetrating mounts, where you can just put bricks on them on the base so it doesn't move, or you can, I guess, drill into the building itself with brackets.
Yeah, and like non-penetrating mounts are more of a distribution point solution.
Okay.
And the roof of my elevator doesn't really allow for that, but the high school where I have the fiber does. And so that might, if I try to do distribution just to catch a couple extra customers off of there, I'll put one of those up. For the customer installs, lots of people have old, like 20 or 30 foot towers for their old, over the air, TV. Because we're rural, right? So when everyone here was growing up, it was, if you didn't have that big tower with the big antenna on it, you didn't get any TV.
Okay.
So lots of people have those, which is nice because then you're not putting any holes in anybody's houses, which, you weatherproof up and everything. There's existing tripods with masts on some places if they were a customer of a WISP previously. Or we go with the basic satellite dish mount, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, Steve, I think this was a great discussion on, building a WISP and sharing your experiences with the listeners. I think it's an interesting journey for you, and even I have interest in it because I'm doing something similar in San Jose for a client. So what I learned from you is will benefit me for sure.
Right on.
Where can people find you online? I mean, you mentioned it in the beginning, but how about you say it again for those that forgot?
Sure, yeah. You can find me on Twitter at AlfMcKim, ALFMCKIM. My blog is at greatwhitewifi.com/blog. And my company website for 45 Networks is at 45networks.ca. And you can get me by email at steve@45networks.ca.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on the show. And we look forward to, maybe hearing from you in the future about how everything's going, how the winter went, and good luck on your new business here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, guys.